G'day guys, it's John from theproductivegarden.com, and today we're going to be making a worm farm out of a wheelie bin, or some people might know them as an auto bin. It's an old bin that I got second hand with wheels on it. Used to be used as some sort of garbage bin. I've given it a good wash so it shouldn't have any contaminants in it. But basically these things sell for a bit more than $200. I got the bin for $15. The parts have cost me about $50, and some of them were a little bit expensive. That's just the way it goes. So I mean, I'll easily build this bin for under $100, and I mean, I could have bought one for $200. So I think that's not a bad way to save some money if you want this sort of thing. And it's going to be a 240 litre worm farm, and it's a portable worm farm on wheels. So if you want to move it around, it's an easy thing to move around. Anyway, let's have a look at what we need to make this worm farm and the tools that we need to make it with as well. Now we'll start with the tools that we need to make this worm farm. Now, one tool that we'll need will be a jigsaw. We'll need a power drill, either cordless or a corded power drill. We'll need a spanner. You can get an adjustable spanner or a spanner to fit the nut, the size of nut that you're going to use. A screwdriver. You'll need a spade bit or a hole saw, whichever you prefer to use. And you'll need a drill of the appropriate size, and the drill I'm going to be using is going to be a 4mm drill bit. Okay, you'll also need a pen and scissors so that you can make a little template that we're going to use later on. To make that template, obviously you'll need some cardboard. I've got a bit of a cardboard box here that I'll be able to make the template out of. Now, the items you'll need to make it, and I'll go to the bin first. Firstly, you're going to need a bin. Okay, like I said, I bought this one from the local waste area, waste disposal, waste depot, whatever you want to call it. And as you can see, it's had a bit of a hose out inside. It was $15, so that was pretty good. You also need some nuts and bolts, and I've got these stainless steel nuts and bolts because they are going to be inside, or part of them is going to be inside the worm farm, so I don't want them to rust very easily. Okay, what I've got here is a deck plate. Actually, I'll get another one. So this is what they look like. Actually, I'll just tip all these out. That's better. Alright, so that's what it looks like from the outside. It's a deck plate, and this middle bit unscrews so you can get access to the bottom of the bin and get worm castings out. And that's the back of it that will be inside. So that will allow you to get access to the castings, and I'll show you how that goes on. And that's what we're going to need the cardboard box to, so that we can make a template that will just make it easier to cut out the hole in the bin so that we can get this fixed nice and firmly and neatly into the bin. You'll also need a valve of some sort, so that you can that's to drain the liquid out of the bottom of the worm farm. Okay, so this is the valve I've decided to use. This is a bit of irrigation connection. It's an adapter from irrigation that I've decided to use, and it fits nicely onto the end of this valve, and that's basically going to be used to lock it on. It's going to be screwed on the inside just to lock the valve into place on the bottom of the worm farm. And what I'm going to be using at the bottom to hold the castings up and allow the moisture to drip through from the bottom is this lid from a container that I had laying around. I don't use the lid at all. The container just has stuff in it, but it's got stuff that's too full to allow the lid to be put on. Yeah, this lid doesn't get used, so it was just laying around really doing nothing. So it'll fit pretty perfectly inside the bin. I just have to give it a little bit of a trim, and then it'll do nicely just as the floor of the actual worm area, allowing the liquid to drip through the bottom. Righto, now one last thing that I'm going to be using is I got these, and I'm going to use these to hold down the lid, or be a way to fasten down the lid so that rats or possums or any other critters can't get in there and either eat the worms or eat the scraps that are in there. So these are basically clips that hold down a cover or a tonneau cover on a ute or a utility, whichever you want to call the vehicle. Yeah, so this is the elastic strap that goes around these buttons. So the elastic strap's attached to the tonneau cover normally, and these buttons are attached to the walls of the tray on the back, and they will basically, the elastic will go on here and button will go on here or probably on here, so that it can stretch over and hold the lid down so that nothing can lift it up and make access to it if I don't want them to. Alright, now that's the parts that we need and the tools that we need to make it with. Now let's put plans into action and start making this worm farm. Right, now what we want to do is make a hole here so that we can fit this valve, so it'll sit basically like that on this wheelie bin. Okay, so what I have done is I've marked the middle. So one of the other tools you'll need is a measuring tape, so I've just sort of roughly measured where the middle's going to be and done a little cross, so I've got the middle and how high I want the valve to be. So like I said, I'm going to be using a spade bit, and the reason I've chosen this is because getting something to fit that exactly was difficult. So with a spade bit I can get the basic hole in and then make the hole bigger just by moving the spade bit around and just shaving a little bit off the hole at a time. And then I'll be able to make it bigger. Getting a hole sort of fit exactly was hard. So yeah, spade bits seem to be the easier option for me. I know there are other ways to make holes in the plastic, but that's what I've decided to do. So we'll get this hole done and then we'll get the valve installed. So now I've got the tap installed, I need to get this irrigation adapter on the other side to hold it on. One of the other things I forgot to mention that is worthwhile using as well is a bit of Silastic as well, just to seal any of these joints, just in case there's any leaks that might come through. This will help to prevent them. And if you get a little bit of liquid leaking out of here, it's not going to be a big deal, unless it's going to make a mess where you've got the worm farm. But just to make it nice and clean, so we haven't got any stuff dripping out, I'm going to use Silastic to just to seal it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Silastic around the inside, which means I'm going to have to crawl inside the bin, which is going to be a bit of a feat for me. I'll crawl inside the bin, I'll get this nut on, and while I put the nut on, or before I put the nut on, I'll put some Silastic around the valve inside and then screw the nut on, and that should seal the Silastic just nicely so that the liquid doesn't leak out from around the valve. So I'll do that, and then we'll move on to getting the deck plates. They'll be going on the front and on each side. Alright, so it's time to fix these deck plates. Now what I've done is I've measured up how far I want it to be from the bottom, so I've measured up 22 centimetres because the floor for the actual worm, the lid that I'm putting in there to hold the worm castings up will be about here, and that just gives me a little bit of clearance. I don't need to be right down the bottom of the worm area. So 22 centimetres up is where I'm going to have it, which I think is about 11 inches, I think. So that's where I will have the it might be 9 inches actually. I'll have to check that. I'll leave a thing here telling you how much that is in inches, but 22 centimetres, and just mark the middle there as well, so I know where the middle is, and so I can place it where I want it to be. Now the template that I'm using, I've just cut a circle which is as big as this outside ring on the deck plate. Okay, so I've got the circle here, so what I can do is I can place this where I want it to go. Okay, hold it down, and then I can draw the shape around the template. Now I know that that is the shape that I want to cut out. Now it looks really rough. I'll try to cut it a lot neater than that. But yeah, we'll see how this goes with the jigsaw. I don't know how hard this stuff's going to be to cut, but what I'm going to do is, to start the jigsaw, I'm just going to use the spade bit again just to make a hole so that I can get the jigsaw in there and start the cut. Okay, so I'll get this in there and then we'll get a spot where we can start the cut. Alright, now it's just a matter of just getting the jigsaw and we'll cut around here. Alright, so now I've got a hole cut to fit the deck plate on, so the deck plate can fit nicely there. And now what I have to do is just drill some holes so that the screws can go through. So I'll get my 4mm drill bit and drill the holes there. That'll allow the screws to go through, and then we can do up the nuts. And before we put the screws and nuts in place, we'll be putting a bead of Silastic around here just to seal it nicely. Not that a lot of liquid will come out here, but it'll just help to seal the hole, just so it's nice and snug. Okay, so we'll drill these holes, get the silicone and the nuts in place, and finish off this deck plate. Now we'll get a good thick bead of Silastic around the outside of this deck plate, and no need to skimp on this. Alright, got the Silastic on there. We'll get the deck plate in place and just line it up again with the holes. And then the holes we've drilled are just a little bit smaller than the thread on these screws, so it should just be a matter of screwing these through. So there's one. We won't do it up real tight in case we need to do a little bit of adjusting. We'll get another one in. Alright, we'll get the rest of these screws in, and the plate will just naturally, as you screw it down, especially as you put the nuts on the other side. Now I've got the hole there. I'll just redo this hole. Yeah, I seem to have it. There we go, I think. Okay, so like I was saying, when we do the nuts up on the inside, it'll pull the deck plate against the wall of the bin and seal that Silastic down pretty well. So I'll get the rest of these screws in, I'll screw it on the other side, and then what we've got to do is just, I'll trim the lid of the tub that I've got to put as a floor, and I'll show you what I'm going to do to install that. It's going to be really simple, it's not going to be much at all involved in that, but I'll get this done and then we'll put the floor in. Okay, so you can see I've got the deck plate in place. There's the one on the front, there's the one on the side, which I've actually taken the cover out of just to get access there, and the one on the other side. Get that in focus, there we go. Yeah, so I've got them on there. I haven't tightened the nuts yet. I'm just going to get the floor in the bottom. Now, what I've done, I've trimmed off the bottom of this, the end of this lid. I've also drilled a heap of holes in it. Now, just a heap of holes in the bottom, just drilled at random. I've also drilled holes in the little low points where liquid would build up, just so we don't get any sort of build up of soggy vermicast that would go all acid and all horrible and smelly. So that'll allow any liquid that builds up in those areas, that'll allow it to drain away. Okay, now what I've done, you can see inside there I've got some bricks in the bottom. Now that's going to hold up the front. I'm not going to worry about trying to screw it in and all that sort of thing. I don't really think it's necessary, and it's just going to make it easier if one day I want to pull the floor out. I'm just going to be able to lift it out without having to undo any screws or anything like that. Okay, Now I've just put a bit of silastic on the bottom of those bricks just to sort of hold them still. I don't expect it to do a great job of holding them still, but it'll do just to get them there. Once there's some weight put on them, they'll stay where they are, and they're only just holding up the floor anyway. Okay, and you can see there's a little step in the back there, and that's going to be what holds it up in the back. Okay, now I'll put this in. It fits pretty snug. It takes a bit of wriggling around to get it in. It's a lot easier doing it with two hands than one. Rightio, and you can see it fits in there pretty snug. Might just have to adjust it, push it over that side a little bit, just to get it to fit in a bit better. But that's not really going to matter. A little bit of vermicast might fall down there. I might just trim this corner here just so it fits in a bit better. Okay, so that's how the floor is going to go in, and yeah, it'll allow the liquid to drip to the bottom and hold all the vermicast up. Okay, now that the deck plates are in place and the floor of the worm area is in place, it's time to get the I don't know what you would call it, the elastic fastener in place to hold it down. Now what I've had to do on this one here, I've drilled a hole in the middle at the front. Before I did that, I pressed this yellow stud in the back, and what that does is that holds this elastic in place so it doesn't slide out. Then I've drilled a hole down the middle so I can get this screw in so that I'll be able to fix it there. Okay, now with this one here, it's just coincidental that it's nicely countersunk and the screw will just fit very nicely in place there. So it's just a matter of me drilling a hole there and basically putting it in place. Now what I've done is I've marked some marks in the middle so I know where the middle is. So if that sits there, the elastic will fairly easily stretch down over the button now, over this button. Okay, so I'll put these in place and then we're able to fasten the lid down. So putting it in place is just a matter of drilling a hole here, thereabouts. And we'll drill a hole down here for the button. What have we got there? Okay, so when you drill holes, beware of what's behind them. There's a bit of like plastic bracing behind which holds this little sort of collar out, so I'm just going to have to off-center the button a little bit so I don't hit that little bit of bracing. There we go, that's better. Alright, now I should be able to fasten this on. Right, and of course I'll put a nut on the other side of this to hold it on, and this button will go on here. Okay, so like I said, I just need to tighten this up and put a nut on the inside of them, but you can see here now it's fastened down. Nothing's going to be easily able to get into that, and even like things like the wind or anything like that isn't going to get underneath the lid and possibly blow it open. So it's as easy as that. Just put this thing together, push the button in the back of it, the white button in the back of it. Like I said, that holds the elastic in. Drill a hole in the middle, then you can get that screw through. Easy as. Okay, so that's done. we've just got one more step to do before this is ready for worms to go in. Rightio. Now, we've just put the latch, can't think, the locking device on there. Now, the other thing we've got to do is just put some ventilation holes up the top here. Now, because this is locked down fairly tight, and there's with the tubs, I believe there's a lot of room for air to move between the tubs, so I don't think there's really a big need for ventilation, and I've never needed any in my other worm farm, my smaller worm farm. But on this one, because it's locked down and there's not really any holes down the bottom to let air flow through, I believe it's important to have some holes up the top to let air flow through. So all I'm going to do, and I'll do it on either side, and you've got these supporting ribs here as a nice little guide. So what I'm going to do is just drill just a series of holes just between each of these ribs on each side of the bin. Now I've got a little 1.95mm, basically you may as well say 2mm drill bit here, and the reason I've chosen a small one like this is it's going to stop blowflies and that sort of thing going in there and laying maggots in there. So all I'm going to do is just, and being careful with this drill as well, I don't want to snap it by being too heavy on it, and I'll just drill a little series of holes. So I'll drill 4 across there and drill some more here. Now, if you wanted to, you could easily just get a vent of some sort and just cut out a hole and install a vent. You could easily just maybe cut out a hole with a hole saw and glue or fasten somehow some sort of fine mesh screen there. So, yeah, there are other ways to do it, but basically this is the way I'm choosing to do it. Just 4 rows of 4 holes there, and that'll let some air flow through. So whichever way you choose to provide some ventilation to the worm farm, as long as it's not letting flies and stuff in there that are going to lay maggots in, I mean, if it works, and that's great. So yeah, that's how I'm doing it. I'm just going to drill a series of holes there, 4 by 4, in between each of the ribs like this on each side. So in the end, there'll be 2 here, 2, 2 and 2, so there'll be 8 sets of holes. That should allow plenty of air to flow through there. Okay, so I'll do these, and then we'll get the worms. In the worm farm. All right, I'll finish this off and then I'll be back. So now we're ready to add the worms. Now what I've got here is some coconut coir, which I've got soaking in here, and it's now a nice water sodden mess, I guess. And I've got some worms with some food. You can't really see the worms, I'll probably have to dig them out. Where are they? There were heaps of them here before. There they are, all underneath. So you can see there a heap of worms that I harvested out of my other worm farm, and I'll probably get a few more than this out of there sometime later. But that's just what I dug up quickly, just to stick in there now. And they've got a bit of the food scraps that was in there with them, and a bit of the worm castings as well. So what I'm going to do is put this coconut coir in the bottom of the worm farm. Okay, so we'll just tip it all out. It's a bit hard to do with one hand. Okay, and the excess water, I'll scrape that out later on and chuck it in. The excess water will drip through, and it's going to take a little bit of liquid to fill this up. Actually, what I might do, these deck plates, they're a bit easier to undo with 2 hands than one. There it goes. Okay, so if I get down a bit, you can see in there. So there you go, that's how you access it. Okay, so I'll spread all that out. There we go. Spread a bit more over here. Okay, now it doesn't really matter if I don't cover the whole thing. They'll cover it all eventually. Now I'll put these guys in there. Okay, I'll get all them out. There's a few still little stragglers in there. I might just put a little slosh of water in there and get the last of them out. So there you go. We've got some worms in there, and we've got what we've got as well is a Hessian sack, or a bit of Hessian that we've got there. And what we'll have to do, we'll just have to sort of unfold it a bit, and that'll basically go down and cover them over. So something like that, and it'll be, if I can straighten it out a bit better when I'm not holding a camera and trying to do it at the same time. Okay, so I'm expecting eventually the level of the food will come up to here, and that'll like would basically be a small layer of food on top, like that much. It won't be much at all, and the rest will be vermicasts, and it'll be just be a matter of opening up the deck plates and just using your hand or a small hand spade or something like that, just getting in there and digging out a bit of vermicast for whatever use, whether they're for seedlings or put around plants and that sort of thing, and then put the deck plate back, and that'll be the way that you harvest the vermicast from the worm farm. Alright, so that's how we make this worm farm. Like I said, they value at about $200 to buy them from people that make them. So I've spent, I added it up with everything, about $80. So I've well and truly saved half the price, more than half the price of what this would be worth if I was to buy it. So it's well worth making it yourself. If I was to buy one of these bins new, they're worth about $100 on their own. So I was able to get this for $15, like I said, so that's taken a big slab off the price there straight away. Yeah, I mean, always try and get your stuff as cheap as you can. Sometimes you can't get them cheap, like the lid, it was just off a tub that I already had, so I didn't need to spend any money on that at all. I mean, these things, I had to buy a pack of those. I had to buy stainless steel screws, and I would recommend using stainless steel screws rather than just normal steel screws or zinc plated screws, because they won't rust the way other screws will, and they're going to be under like worm poo. They're going to be in a moist environment all the time. So stainless steel, marine quality bolts and nuts are going to be the best, and they can be pretty expensive. They were worth, like the screws, the bolts and the nuts for this, they were worth $30 on their own. So I mean that puts up the cost a bit. I mean, if you were to use a cheaper version of screw, or sorry, bolt and nuts and bolts, you could save a little bit of money there, but you'd end up with a pretty messy, rusted out sort of fastening system in the end. So I think it's better off just spending a bit of money on things like that, just to make sure it's done really well and that it's going to last a fair amount of time. Everything's pretty easy to get at most places. The hardest thing to source are the deck plates. Now, the deck plates, you'll be looking for them in a boat accessory shop, somewhere that sells like accessories for all types of boating. You can find them online if you just search for deck plates, and they're basically, what they're used for is they're little openings to get into cavities inside boats to get to fluid lines or electrical cabling and that sort of thing. So that's basically what they're used for. Okay, and actually I did try a few other things, some plumbing access ports and that sort of thing that I thought I might be able to adapt to the situation. They ended up being a lot more expensive than the deck plates were. So they're actually one of the cheaper ways of achieving an opening in a bin to achieve that, to get that something that'll work and look neat and tidy. Anyway, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video on how to make this worm farm, and maybe you'll have a go of making one of these yourself. Anyway, until next time, happy productive gardening. Bye.